on vinyl community? Welcome to another video with the Record Spinner. In today's video, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I did not see myself making this video, but after I gave this album a listen, I felt the need to address my opinion on it and do a proper review. So with all that being said, I'm going to be talking about Boarding House Reach by Jack White. This is his latest solo album from Third Man Records, and very long overdue in my opinion. It had been about 4 years since we got an album from Jack, his last made one being 2014's Lazaretto. So with a gap of 4 years, it was about time for a new album, and I was very excited when this album was released. I pre-ordered it right away, and I was very excited to give this album a listen. So before it was released, we got 5 tracks released to the public. We got the main single, Connected by Love, along with its B-side, Respect Commander. Then we got Corporation. Then we got the second single, which was Over and Over and Over. And then we got I Station Zebra. So with all those songs out before the album, after listening to them, I knew that we were going to be in for a very interesting and different album from Jack. So I made sure to have a fresh set of ears when it came to listening to the album, and I made sure I didn't have any preconceived notions or expectations. Because if you try to rack up a new release up with another artist's catalog, you might be bound to be disappointed, and I didn't want that to be the case. So I knew that Jack was going to be very willing to experiment with this album, so I welcomed it. And that's why I really grew to love this record, and I'll say why as this video goes on. So, this album starts off with the song Connected by Love, which was the first single that we got from this album. And it's a bit of an unusual album opener in comparison to some of his other album openers, such as Missing Links, which is from Blunderbuss, and Three Women from Lazaretto. But I feel that it delivers the same amount of power and energy from those openers that I just mentioned, so I feel like it works in that context, and it opens up the album very nicely. The next song is a slow rock waltz, which is Why Walk a Dog, and this song gives a little indication on what we're expecting in this album, and this is the first time that I actually heard electronic drums come out of a Jack White album. I know that he is all for using live instrumentation in his work, but this is the kind of first indication that we're going to be in for something different. The organ in this song is very eerie, and it kind of reminds me of the song Blue Veins from the Raconteurs album, Broken Boy Soldiers, and it also kind of sounds like something that would come from a Dead Weather album. And I also feel that the guitar tone that he does in his solo is kind of reminiscent of the White Stripes as well. So it's kind of a melting pot. You know, he's kind of incorporating all his stuff that he has established in all his projects into his own work by himself, which I think is really cool. The next song on this record is another song that we got before the album came out, and that's Corporation. This is a really cool, funky type of number with some really cool syncopated guitar and keyboards, and there's another motif that starts with this song that runs within this album, and that's the idea of like spoken word lyrics. So he kind of like shouts it out in this song, like the lines thinking about starting a corporation, who's with me? And that who's with me tagline is something that really went with the promotional stuff that came with this album. So that was kind of cool. It's really amped up. It has a lot of spunk, for lack of a better term. It just, you can really sense the attitude that Jack is really giving off in this vocal, and that's what makes the song a real kind of big highlight on this album. The spoken word motif continues on the next track, which is called Abulia and Acrasia. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. And this song sounded kind of a bit, I don't know if you can say classical, kind of a bit romantic type sounding, very swelling in places in the instrumentation. I know that there's some trumpet, trombone, and tuba on it, and the spoken word bit is actually spoken by a guy named C.W. Stone King. You would expect that if it's Jack White's album, he'll be doing his own spoken word bits, but instead we got something different, which was interesting. The next track is, this one's a tongue twister, this is called Hyper Misophoniac. Now this song starts with this synth swell, which sounds a bit disjointed at first when you hear it. But once the instrumentation really kicks in the song, it blends well and it really, merges well with the song, and it doesn't really stand out as much as it did when the song first started. The next track on the album is another song that we got before the album was released, and that's I Station Zebra. Now, the beginning of the song kind of sounds like classic Jack White territory. It kind of sounds similar in style to the song Take Me With You When You Go, which is off of his first album, Blunderbuss. But once the lyrics start, it's like Jack White does rap. Like, he's actually dabbling in rap on this album, which is very interesting and different. And towards about the second half of the lyrics, when he sings them, there's a little bit of melody in there as well, which is different and interesting. And I found myself to really enjoy that track as well. Kind of threw me off at first, but once I heard it while listening to the album, because I did listen to the track before the album had come out, it kind of clicked in. It's just one of those things that, your head wraps around it a second time. Happens. So that's side one. Then on side two, we started off with the song Over and Over and Over. Now, this track is an absolute standout song. This is classic Jack White, White Stripes territory. I've read in interviews that this song actually stems from the album Get Behind Me, Satan. They actually tried it out around that, and he had been trying to work it into other projects of his, but it really came back to life on this album, and it is just absolutely in your face, loud, punchy. It is just an all-around classic, and I really do love this song very much. Then we get back into the more experimental stuff with the next song, which is Everything You've Ever Learned. Now, the intro is a spoken word bit with some synth sounds going on in the background, and it sounds like a narrator that's about to kick off like a video game or some sort of big event. It just sounds kind of eerie in some ways, but then again kind of exciting. It's the hello, welcome to everything you've ever learned. It just sounds really weird. It's just, I can't explain it, but it's an interesting way to start the song off, and it kind of kicks into a very kind of drum and guitar amped up intense segment with vocals that are kind of spoken word, but kind of delivered in a shouting Jim Morrison type of attempt. That's the kind of vibe that I got from the song overall. And then the next track is the B-side to the Connected by Love single, which is Respect Commander, which is a drum pattern that starts off in the beginning of the song, then it gets sped up again, with the guitar kind of following it, trying to go along with it, because it starts off kind of slow at first, and then it just completely speeds up. And then after that kind of madness in the beginning of the song, it kind of segues into a very slow blues type of number, which is kind of classic Jack White territory, because his roots are in the blues, so it really works well in that song. The next track is Esmeralda Steals the Show, which is another spoken word bit similar to Abulia and Acrosia, but the guitar motif, if you listen to it, it sounds very similar to the song Everybody Hurts by REM. Listen to it for yourself. Check it out. But it is really, really nice. And that kind of continues into the next song, which is Get in the Mine Shaft. And when you listen to it, you really got to think to yourself, I really have to get in the mine shaft to really listen to this track, because there is a little bit of spoken word bit, but not so much, and there is some synthesized vocals. Sounds like it's coming from a vocoder, and there's also some really nice backup vocal harmonies that go on as well. It sounds very kind of majestic in places, which is it's a bit of a cool track, but it doesn't really kind of stand out in some senses for me personally. The next track is another kind of classic Jack White territory, and that's the song What's Done Is Done. You could say in some ways when you first hear it, it's kind of a reprise of Connected by Love. Not entirely, but similar in the music style. And it's also, you could say, a bit of a compliment to the song Love Interruption from the Blunderbuss album, simply because it sounds very similar in style. And the last track on this album, and this is the most interesting and probably one of the absolute standouts, and that's the song Humoresque. Now, this is a cover song, actually, and Jack covers, of all people, legendary gangster Al Capone. This is his take on a piece of music which was written by a classical artist called, see if I can pronounce this right, Antonin Dvorak. I know that there's a way that you say it, but pardon me for not saying it correctly. It's like a lullaby, but then the outro of the song has these very jazz influenced piano chords being played out, and it fades out. It is just the most coolest album closure, but the most different though, considering all the tracks on this record and how they're similar and just how it's a different kind of animal with this record. And the reason why it is different is because Jack approached this album unlike anything that he has done in his career. He is always known for being a bit of an analog enthusiast and recording onto analog tape and using some equipment that gives him a bit of restrictions, such as guitars. But on this album, he actually went out and used Pro Tools in the recording, mixing, editing process, and he actually updated his guitar line to the Eddie Van Halen signature guitar. So it kind of gave him a bit of a different feel for this. Which I can see why he really went down that experimental route. There's a lot of interesting edits that go on in the songs, like sometimes, like for instance in the song Over and Over and Over, the vocals kind of sound a bit disjointed in the over and over, like in that section they sound completely like mispitched, and it sounds down several octaves, and it sounds slowed down. And just imagine if he took the songs from this record and done them in the analog style. Would they be similar or different to what we got in the final product? We'll never know. So with just the approach and how he took things with this album, it's important to listen to it with a fresh set of ears, and that's exactly what I did, and that's why I really grew to love it. If you're a Jack White fan, really give this album a chance. I understand that the reviews have been a bit mixed in some cases, but that's okay. I mean, any artist is going to get some criticism on a new endeavor, but who knows, sometime, maybe 10, 20 years down the line, this album might stand out in some sense. And just right off the bat, at this point, considering that it's just been released just about a week ago, it does stand out for being so different. And will Jack continue down this route? We'll never know. Maybe we'll wait 4 years for a follow-up for this. But I did really enjoy it, and I do think that it is worth investigating. So that's with just the music. I'll show off the artwork. So here's the front cover with the person on there. Interesting thing, I read, I don't know if it was the interview that he did with Rolling Stone, but if you cover the eyes, it looks like a female, but if you cover the mouth, it looks like a human. Kind of an interesting thing. It's kind of cool. Here's the back cover right here. And you can see some monkeys right there as well. Cool stuff. You also get a lyric folder, which has some artwork on the front. And then you open it up, and you have the lyrics, so you can sing along to the songs. One of the missed opportunities, I would say, is that if you look underneath like the song titles, you can see some blue writing, which has like the credits on who did what and everything. You can hardly really read it. You need to put it to a good light to read it. This is one minor gripe. And it's on the back side there. And then I'll showcase the vinyl as well. Before I show it off, I will say that this album, along with some other recent Third Man releases, have been pressed at Jack's newest record pressing plant, Third Man Pressing in, I believe it's Detroit in Michigan, which I think is excellent because before that, a lot of the Third Man releases were pressed at United Record Pressing. United is notorious for having bad quality control. I've received some records from United that had some minor defects, and I think perhaps the winching and moaning about the quality control got to them, and maybe, or it just simply was Jack wanted to just do his own plant, which is actually an all-manual process instead of the usual automatic process that goes with vinyl manufacturing. Just a little bit of a cool fun fact to know. Showcase the label off. Basic blue label right there. Nice 180 gram vinyl press. And this was mastered by Wes Garland at Nashville Record Productions. So it sounds very good, very dynamic sounding record. I was reading some stuff on Discogs, and people were saying that you really kind of need a good, audio system to experience this album. So, it really gives really good dynamics in the recording. The one downside with the vinyl version is that you don't get a download code, which is kind of unfortunate, and it does suck because I'm kind of used to getting the download codes with newer releases, and I know that Jack's other albums came with download codes as well. But luckily, since I got this off of Amazon, they do have the auto-rip function when it comes to anytime you buy a physical release, whether it be CD or vinyl, so I was able to get my digital download in, so all was forgiven. So, that is my review of Boarding House Reach by Jack White. Like I said, this was my very first album review, so I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, please let me know in the comments below, and that way I know to perhaps do some more album reviews in the future. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next video, and most importantly, keep the record spinning.